Hi, this is Buzz Delano for Delano News Advance. Thanks for taking the time to watch our interview here. And today we have Pat and Phil Mulligan of Pacific Audio Communications in Hawaii joining us. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time that you're here. So today we're going to talk about some really important, insightful things at PAC Audio, Pacific Audio Communications. And so I do know, gentlemen, that as you told me, you're celebrating a 35-year anniversary of your business. So that's certainly an accomplishment. Maybe tell us a bit more about that and maybe some of the key pillars of why you've made it 35 years.
There's a certain part of it that over time you are able to understand clients' needs better, and you're able to understand the clients you don't want to work with better. And I think we've been really, really lucky to have really, really good clients. And we've only had maybe 2 clients that we walked away from. Maybe there was a couple more than that. And then found out later, a year or 2 into it, going, wow, that was the best decisions we ever made. And I think a lot of it is learning and understanding how to read your clients, to understand how to. And being here locally, growing up here locally, having my dad start an electrical contracting business here, and having those connections to start with really was helpful too.
Right, that put you really squarely in the community.
Yeah.
And so you're a homegrown Hawaiian business.
Yes, yeah, and then taking some risk when in your mind your mind goes, I don't know if I should do that. But I gotta, just within the last 5 or 6 years, growing this business from just Maui and Kauai, we expanded to Kauai pretty heavily in, it was like 2011, and then expanding to the Big Island in 2019, late 2018, and then Oahu in right during COVID, 2020.
Wow.
That's when Pono came on.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. You mentioned that the other day, Pat.
So right now we're sitting at 28 employees. We have offices and people on every island. And then we have a contingent of engineers out of the mainland that are staff that do our drawings and our proposals and shop drawings and things like that at the end of the job.
I have a quick question about the staff that you have that you refer to here in the mainland that does drawings and stuff like that. Employees?
Amount of work that we're doing. And it's easier to get type of staff, people doing the install when they have to be local,
of course.
But where that kind of a staff, we could have it, those are easier to find remote type of people.
But something that works in our favor, especially here in the islands, it's a different business model, right? We were separated by water. Nothing is made here. We don't have any Best Buys. We don't have none of that. So we rely heavily on what's coming from the mainland. What I'm getting to is having some of the engineering staff between California, Nevada, Vegas areas. With them being there, they can get to some of these trade shows and even some of these smaller shows way better than we can, right? And less expensive.
Right.
Having them in places like that, hey, can you stop down at X, Y, and Z and check them out real quick? Yeah, no problem. So for us, that works out because now we have 3 people on the mainland that can get to these other events way easier than we can.
Yeah, that makes sense to utilize them as that resource as well.
Yeah.
Well, pretty cool. So in the things that audio goes through, it's very common with a lot of system integrators, no matter where they're located. But when you're in a location, like you said, separated by water from most of us, challenges and how have you dealt with them being in Hawaii versus the mainland, to run the business, to operate it and be supported?
Well, I mean, I think everybody at this point is staffing is really of a group of people to choose from and get people. And a lot of times we'll bring somebody in from the mainland. Most of them last a year, maybe a little bit longer. It's a difficult thing because of the expense to live here. And then if you're moving here, you're away from your immediate family, your parents or your siblings or whatever, you lose that connection. I mean, nowadays with video conferencing and stuff, it's a little bit easier, and iPhones and talking, and it's a small community. I mean, to get anywhere, you got to get on a plane, right? At minimum, to go to a different island. At minimum it's 5 or 6 hours to get to the mainland. And so there's a separation that I think people maybe don't understand. And some people think, oh, it'll be a vacation when I go out there. Well,
Right.
I mean, you're in a vacation atmosphere, but you still got to work. I mean, granted, it's one of the most beautiful places in the States to come to, but it's such a small community, and it's really interesting having offices on different islands. And you would think that the state would be very similar, right? But it's not. Every island is so unique to itself, and every island has different clientele
and culture.
You know, Maui, our clientele on Maui is not local residents. It's part-time, higher-end residents, clients that are here maybe a couple of times a year. I mean, we have some full-time residents on Maui, but it's far and few between. Whereas Oahu is much more high-end local residents. They have Fortune 500 companies that are on Oahu. And so it's a different atmosphere. Kauai is very similar to Maui, and even Big Island is similar to Maui, but they have larger estate properties on both of those locations, right? And so it's really, really interesting to see the uniqueness of every office as far as clientele. Shipping, everything's got to get shipped in. And so there's no such thing as overnight, except for Oahu.
I want to ask a question about shipping. So obviously all your vendors are in the mainland. Maybe there's some local suppliers for regular supply materials like cable and stuff like that. I don't know. But when you're placing orders with some of your key suppliers who are using products on a regular basis in various quantities, are you able to sometimes do drop ships like to the specific island, or do you more often have to bring it to your primary location and then bring it to the projects at the right time?
No, we'll ship directly to the offices. We've negotiated with our larger vendors to help offset some of that, right, as best we can. And because of the size of our company now, we're able to leverage that size to get some of those accommodations from some of our larger vendors. And larger shipments of stuff still go by boat. So if we're ordering wire, it's a 2-week, maybe 3-week lead time.
Yeah.
And depending where it's coming from, and even a lot of times what will happen is, say it's coming from the East Coast, they'll truck it from the East Coast to the West Coast, and then they'll boat it from the West Coast to wherever. Most of it's going to Oahu first. It gets broken out by Young Brothers and then gets thrown on another container to go to the outer islands. We'll get it in about 2 weeks. If it's an outer island, we're another week out. So we'll get it in 3 weeks.
Yeah. So if you have the opportunity to plan in advance and get the product delivered more economically, obviously it takes more time, and there's a lot more logistical steps there with forwarding and all of that, and also opportunities for something to kind of go haywire. But that's something you're used to, and obviously the suppliers, they value the relationship that they have with you, so the programs are probably pretty good.
There's so many uniquenesses out here, and it's interesting because a lot of times you'll have a mainland company that has a relationship with a client, right? And they'll go, oh yeah, we'll come out and do that work, and they get out here and they're like, oh yeah, there's no ADI, there's no there's no nothing. And sometimes we'll get a call going, hey, we're a mainland company, we're here for a week helping a client. Do you have something? Do you have this? And we'll kind of go, yeah, we do. But however,
there's people out here all the time. And that's part of that logistical thing is, we're going to go do work in Hawaii. And then they don't think about all these other intricacies with logistics. Happens all the time. Right. And we see it all the time, which, again, we're not going to stop them. And we do work on the mainland, too, but we typically reach out to a whole dealer. You got to have the boots on the ground, because at the end of the day, you're doing that client a disservice, because at some point, something is going to break. And are they going to fly you all the way back from Colorado or wherever the dealer's from to come out here and service a light bulb? Or no, it's not. So we get the call, but then we're at the back end of it. There's no money in it. Why not share that well? Kind of hey guys, if you're coming out this way, give us a call before you do that. Because when we do work on the mainland, it's like, hey guys, it's our client. Let us do the design and engineering. Let us do the programming, so that when they go from one location to the other, it's the same thing. But something's going to break at some point. We need local boots on the ground. So why don't you guys rough it in, right? You guys supply whatever you guys are dealers for that match us, and anything that you're not, then we'll take care of it. So they're making money, we're making money, so we both have invested interest in this client.
Yeah, so upfront, Pacific Audio, and in the case of a project like this, the secondary integrator, if your business is well planned out and the project goes smoothly and the customer is happy, then the key thing is things happen to technology. Technology gets updated. And there's obviously, I'm sure you're probably pretty good at this, at a certain point in time when you want to be touching up with clients in Hawaii and in the mainland to make sure, are they happy? There may be new needs. There might be things you want to recommend to them. Our industry, we're certainly never going to get away from hardware being installed, making a property look and work great. But the service aspect, I believe, is accelerating in terms of value. The expectation of clients, especially at the higher end and multiple residents and things like that, it's very high. So if you put yourself in a position with your own business, with supporting integrators to do a great job on the front end, it should put you in a really good position to be better at customer service.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. Yeah, we're selling black boxes. We're a service industry, period.
Tell me a little bit about, I know we talked about your tech staff and various, so let's talk a little bit about your team and how they're growing with the business. And Pat, you also mentioned there's some things happening that are going to be really exciting for the business overall that is going to really be a nice benefit to the employees as well. You can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I can't get into too much detail, but as we mentioned, because we're still in the very forefronts of all of this, but Phil and I had been talking about 35 years in the industry and how do we keep perpetuity behind this, right? And I know it's one thing in our industry that not a lot of people talk about is exit strategies. We want to make sure that for the clients, right, at the end of the day, how do you make this last another 35 years? Well, you have to have, a couple of different ways. One, you sell the company to another entity or whatever, which can happen, but that's not something we want to do. We want to keep it internal as best we can. So we're like I said, it's very internal, it's very early, so we can't get into too many details, but ultimate goal is to allow our teams to come up and kind of like we mentioned, as lawyers do, where they bring in junior partners, stuff like that. Again, for me, it's a sales point too, because you can go to the client and like I think I even mentioned it. I had an AC issue a couple of weeks back, and I even asked the guy. I said, "Hey, where does your business sit as far as ownership? Right? What happens in 10, 20 years?" And they're like, "Oh no, it's internal." And it was interesting because it's the first time I've actually heard of somebody doing that. And that company's, "Oh no, they're doing a partnering thing," and some are doing ESOP stuff and all that whatnot, which is great. I think our industry is lacking in that discussion.
With due respect to other integrators, you're right. It is. There aren't that many that are looking at it that way.
No. And at the end of the day, it's kind of a disservice for the clients, right? Because if we just shut down, then what?
Exactly. So you're talking about evolving the company from within primarily, as opposed to selling out. So that's going to keep the culture and the service of Pacific Audio really consistent. And as it evolves, the ownership of the company will evolve, and everyone should be pretty happy about that because there's going to be part of as they say on the market, a going concern, right?
Yeah.
It's got value in the marketplace, and especially in luxury services, which is really what you do. So I'm pleased to hear that's the way you're looking at the future of the company.
I think CEDIA could pull some classes together, bring some subject matter experts in that understand that, lawyers, whatever the case may be, to talk about, hey, how do you move in this direction? Again, regardless if it's an outright sale to a different entity or another integrator, or it's an internal thing like an ESOP thing, or a combination of both. I think there needs a larger discussion that starts happening in our industry because, again, a lot of our guys are getting older. There's a lot of integrators that are in 20, 30, some even 40 years, even more.
This is a hard industry for ourselves to shake ourselves out of. We really like it. We want to keep doing it. It's always evolving, so we get more excited about the newest technology and what's going on with clients and merging of different trades like design and lighting. So, we're in it for life, which is a great thing, but obviously the future is important for individuals, but for businesses and their value.
The reason that Pacific Audio kind of exists is my background is an electrical contractor, and they're still wiring houses pretty much the same way they did 40 years ago. There's code changes and things like that, some advancements there, right? But when I started looking at this industry and how it changes every 6 months, there's an excitement there. There's a not stagnant excitement there that allowed me to have that ability to continue to learn and have to continue to learn, right? Because it was moving so fast. And so we went from doing electrical work to doing both. At one point, I was running my electrical contracting business and Pacific Audio as separate entities because electrically we were doing those high-end homes, and it made sense to do also the low voltage part of that, right? And at a point, I was just like, I'm having more fun with the low voltage part of it.
Yeah.
We wound down the electrical part of it. And actually, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 5 guys that used to work for me electrically that are now out on their own and have their own businesses, electrical.
Oh, wow.
We do work with them on projects. And even to the fact where one of our guys in Lahaina lost his house during that fire.
Oh my.
Years ago, right? Right now, they're forming, they've got the floor built on his ADU, his auxiliary dwelling unit, right? So he's allowed, because of the property size, he's allowed to have like a cottage and a main house, right? And so they're right now forming the floor for this ADU and actually have the walls up. He sent me some pictures. The walls are going up. They're waiting for trusses. I still hold my electrical contracting license, so we pulled the permit for the project. I called a couple of my guys that are doing their own electrical work, and hey, let's get the band back together. Let's get into his house, give him a hand, get in and out of that place in a day and a half. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go. So at probably more towards the end of February, it should be ready for us to get into. Mm-hmm. So I got one of my guys that retired. I got another guy that has his own company and his son is working for him, and he's got a couple of guys. We're going to go and jump on that project and get it done for one of our guys.
That sounds great. The next thing I'd like to touch on a little bit, Phil and Pat, we talked about this the other day, and you mentioned it earlier kind of as we were getting going in today's conversation, was how you're working with other, well, I'm just going to call them professional influencers, bankers, realtors, insurance companies. I think that's something I had not heard in all of the conversation I've had with integrators for decades about business. And I thought so it stood out, but it also made sense. So can you talk a little bit about how that's kind of an aha moment to do that and how you approach it?
Yeah, because I'm a CEO outreach instructor, and that's kind of where this came into play. I don't know, 12 years ago that I got certified to do that. And Pono and I had done, Pono's who is our COO. He lives on Oahu. We did a show 2021 or 2022 on Oahu with a design firm that was also tied to doing kitchen cabinets and stuff like that. And Pono's wife, Ulu, is a real estate agent. And then she had brought in some of her people because she was like, hey, we'd like to understand more about the technology because our property managers are getting asked questions about technology and how they're lacking in assessments, right? And we'll get into that in a second. But that's kind of how that started, was like we were starting to get these meetings that had other entities involved. And one of them was real estate and property management. And I started looking at this going, wow, okay, I think there's an opportunity in our industry to start talking to these folks, because a lot of the property managers and real estate people are going to know our clients before we do, right? Probably even before the architects, because at some point,
right,
the 3 areas that are before us are going to be banks, because clients are going to need funding. They may have enough money to buy it on their own, but they're smart enough, they're going to use other people's money to build the home. So you got to have bankings involved, right? And then you got to have a real estate agent in order to sell the property. And then you got to have insurance that goes along with all of that stuff, right? So why are we not as an industry talking to those 3 entities? So that's kind of how that came about. And what's even more interesting, and Phil and I have talked about this, the whole company has, because there's a missing segment, and I know Phil will chime in on this, and I still can't believe nobody's been sued over it, is there's no technology assessment, right? So a client comes in, they've got a house they're buying that's 20 years old, right? They get an inspection for everything else, electrical, mechanical, the roofing and all that stuff. That's all, but nobody's doing the electronics in the house, right? And I'm a homeowner, I buy this house, I walk in, and then it's like, dude, your technology is 20 years old. It needs to be upgraded, or something starts failing. There's a disconnect there, right? So we've been asked a few times to create a technology assessment form that somebody would go out and actually critique what is in the house. Hey, your stuff's 20 years old, or hey, some of this is only 5 or 6 years old, so somebody came in and did an upgrade, but this other stuff is, and Phil runs into it all the time with Lutron, especially in our jobs 35 years later. Batteries inside of the Lutron processor, they start failing, and they're old illumination and 20 years old, and you tell the client, hey, now you're going to spend another 40 grand. Well, I just bought this house. Why didn't somebody tell me?
I'm really surprised that somebody hasn't sued the realtor or whoever, because most of the time you have an inspector that is from the real estate side, from the buyer side, right? Goes in, and like Pat said, they'll look at the electrical, they'll look at the HVAC, they'll go up in the attic and check stuff and plumbing and blah, blah, blah. None of them know anything about electronics. And again, you go into a house with, say, a Lutron system in it, it may be 20 years old. It may have illumination in it that is 20 some odd years old. Probably might still work, but that's on borrowed time. And that processor dies. Not only do you have to upgrade the processor, but now you got to upgrade everything.
Yes.
And depending on the size of the house, it could be in excess of $100,000 that they just spent, say, $7 million on.
Right.
And then we become the bad guy, right? And I'm just like, how did the inspector, how is he not liable for that?
Interesting.
It's beyond me.
A very interesting perspective is building inspectors at any given level of the property. Yeah, we know they look for plumbing and foundational and sparking outlets and roofing and things on all types of homes. But there's an opportunity for smart integrators such as yourselves and for savvy business building inspectors and other professionals to learn about technology and then to make it part of, again, making it a great customer service experience for their client, whether it's someone that's purchased a home.
I mean, the problem is, right, the seller doesn't want that.
No.
The new buyer is going to go, well, I want $100,000 discount on this or whatever, right? So the seller doesn't want it, right? I can't understand why the buyer and their people aren't doing this, especially since, I mean, they're going and looking at the AC units and going, these are 10 years old, they got another 5 years lifespan at max, or whatever the case is, right? And in a large custom residence, I mean, some of our contracts are in excess of $500,000.
Right.
You know, I mean, we finished up a project in 2024 that the theater alone was $1.8 million. And the rest of the electronics in the house were another $500,000.
Right.
So it's not small, potentially not small numbers. And to go into buying something for $10 million or whatever it is, unknowing that there's a potential of $100,000 or $200,000 of upgrades that are going to have to get done, maybe not right away, but and then what happens when they show up with a bunch of people in the house and the processor dies?
Exactly. Yeah, that's part of the infrastructure. Yeah, maybe it's not quite as vital as water and electricity, but it's becoming more so. In this discussion, in this conversation, it seems to me like the related professional that needs to be the biggest advocate for the home buyer, for the client, is the realtor in this.
Yes.
Advocate for their buyers to be aware of this and to be making sure that they get, in this model, these things inspected. Yeah, the sellers might resist it, but they're motivated to sell at any given level.
Yes.
So getting realtors to advocate for smart technology in general, becoming more aware of it, especially in that inspection process, is a pretty revealing opportunity, I think.
Yeah. And it's something that's pretty easily, we've even told the real estate people, hey, go in and take pictures of the technology, right? And at least we can tell you, oh yeah, that's 10 years old, or that's 5 years old, or that's this, that, or the other thing. I mean, at minimum, we'll charge a minimum fee of just to review it,
Right.
and go, here's our recommendation to it. At minimum, say, hey, your network is 5 years old. Your lighting system is 20 years old. Some of these things are end of life, and your potential problem that could happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow. Eventually, it's going to have to get replaced.
Yes, it will happen. Yeah, so Pat, you call it the technology assessment. That really is a great way to phrase and brand position, if you will, this particular, again, customer service value that would help bring in other professionals. To do outreach with bankers, insurers, realtors, do you do any particular type of events or any outreach?
Like I said, we did a show on Oahu with Bono and all that stuff. The caveat, and this isn't a key portion of it, but it would make things a lot easier. And again, Buzz, we talked about it last week on our intake, is if CEDIA could work with, again, banks, real estate, and insurance. And I'm going to get into insurance because we talked about water. I want to come back to that.
Oh, yes, we did.
Finding a way for us to give them points, right? Because we can do CEUs for the design build community, so architects, designers, even certain builders, right? So we can say, hey, as the way we typically do it is at the end of closer to the end of the year, like September, October, when those guys are going, oh shoot, I haven't gotten all my CEUs, because right, if they're part of the AIA or ASID community, they're supposed to do a certain amount of continuing education points per year, like a lot, like Phil has to do for electrical and stuff like that too. So we typically reach out and go, hey, are you guys lacking points? If you are, hey, we can do a lunch and learn. So that's how we've done it in the past, our foot in the door for them, and just reach out and say, hey, you guys need points? So that gets us our foot in the door with those guys. So that's how we've done it in the past. Now, if CEDIA could find a way to work CEUs, again, for those three other industries, the real estate side, they have to do CEUs, real estate does. I don't know if the banking side does, but I know insurance does as well. There's a way we could get in and give them points. It would just be an easier way to get our foot in the door, very similar to what we do with the design build side.
That makes sense. Well, you as a certified instructor, and then of course all of us and myself, we've got voices within CEDIA. I mean, every member has a voice. Some of us are a little bit more involved. I'm going to be with CEDIA leadership next week in Barcelona. I'll touch up on this, and I think coming out of this, let's see if we can do something about that. We've got a great trade association that is really focused on advocacy for making our industry better, not just technology, but better business. So this would speak to that. So I think that's really savvy. I want to respect everybody's time, and we're getting to that point where we could certainly keep going a long time. We can probably do this again some other time. I'll look forward to that. Maybe I'll find myself in the same room with you guys sometime this year, and we can do something like that. But before we go, I think it's important because a lot of people, everybody knows Hawaii. It's far away, it's beautiful and all that. But things happen all over the world and all over our country. But obviously something difficult, to say the least, happened in Lahaina a couple of years ago. You want to talk a little bit about, maybe not so much, I think everybody knows what occurred, but how things are coming along and what some of the realities are for local business, local residents with the recovery of Lahaina.
It's been very difficult. I mean, when it first happened, there was outcry of don't come here kind of thing, which really shouldn't have happened. There was an effort to get everybody that tourist-wise out of Lahaina. That was a whole ordeal as well. As far as where we're at today, there's a ton of construction going on right now in Lahaina, a ton of housing going on, which is really encouraging. The county has really expressed and moved permitting quickly for specific areas in Lahaina. The last I looked, I think there were over 100 homes that were either under construction or completed. FEMA has thrown a ton of stuff going on there. There's residences that are non-permanent that have been constructed and or moved into that area. So people that were, say, in hotels can get into kind of more a permanent situation. It's phenomenal, the amount of work and energy that has happened over the last couple of years there. The business area of Front Street is still, there's nothing really going on there.
Sad.
There's nothing there, right? It's a brand new start over kind of thing. So they're really trying to get community input to how they want that to happen. The problem with Front Street is there were a lot of things that were on the ocean side of the road, right? And with the advent of ocean levels rising and stuff like that, it's almost like, I don't think that's going to happen. The building on that ocean side area, how and what do they do with that property, and how do they develop Front Street back? That's much longer time frame, I think. Maybe in another couple of years we'll start to see building on Front Street happen commercial wise. It's a long process.
The biggest impact, I'm sure, is for local residents who lost homes and businesses. The tourism business, okay, it has an impact, but there's ways around that, and there's other islands. But yeah, people live there, lives are there. And just to go through having a terrible fire in any manner, especially as rapidly and as devastating as that was, can't even imagine. It doesn't matter the scale of whatever lifestyle you're leading. Your home, your community is gone very quickly. Yeah, recovery, unfortunately, anywhere. It takes time.
Prior to the fire, there was a problem. And you lose 2,000 or 30, it was like 3,000 homes, I think, and businesses that get gone in an instant. Then where do those people go that were out of those places? And so, housing wise, it's really, really bad. I mean, again, the county has done over the last year and a half or 2 years, there's several projects that are coming online right now that people should be able to start moving into in the next 4 or 5 months in smaller sections. There are phases of those that are finishing and getting ready now, but there's a phase 2 and phase 3 and phase 4 of housing that are going to come online fairly quickly in the next couple of months. And so to see that really, really encouraging. And the mayor had just become mayor at the time of the fire, and he's actually a classmate of ours. He was a year older than me in high school. He was a former judge, right, that was retired and came in, and Pat and I sat on some boards with him and prior to him becoming mayor, and to see his ability to communicate to the community and watch that get better and better and better as he became more into the whole thing of how it had to happen. It's kind of cool to see, you know, and to be able to have a kind of a contact there that we could kind of, and his chief of staff is a classmate of mine, and a lot of his heads of departments now were former classmates. So we kind of have a back door into that to get a better understanding of what's going on and how to get through it. Very interesting to see and watch.
Yeah, well, that's important then. Well, 35-year homegrown Hawaii business, you guys are committed to the community. Pat, you've had a lot of, if to use a phrase from earlier, a lot of boots on the ground personal time yourself, you know, right when the fire happened.
Yeah, that's the team. I switched the picture. So I'm part of the U.S. Air Force Auxiliary. I'm actually the chief of staff for the Hawaii wing. We have over 800 U.S. Air Force members, auxiliary members in the state for Civil Air Patrol. Yeah, part of our mission is we deal with disaster recovery. So we do search and rescue. When we have hurricanes or tsunamis, our planes are in the air doing announcements. But back to your question, yeah, I mean, that's the team I had. That's the team I was able to run. It was one of the best teams I've had the privilege of working with.
Yes.
We were in the field basically 3 days after the fire. We would have gone up the next day because that happened Tuesday. We would have gone, well, we did. Our planes were the first ones up in the air because we have access to restricted airspace because of who we are. And we were the only plane that had the ability to go up and do photography. And I was actually at the EOC. Our planes launched at 6 a.m. By 7, they were in Lahaina. We were getting live feeds to the EOC from our planes, and you could hear a pin drop when the aerial image is from 500-foot ceiling, right? Because we knew it was bad. Everybody knew it was bad. You just don't know until you see an aerial view of 10 square miles. It looked like a bomb had dropped in the middle of Lahaina and just devastated it. That's what it looked like.
Wow.
Now, unfortunately, I'm a combat veteran. So for me, yeah, it was shocking and hurtful, but I was like, okay, this is serious and this is legit. Let's go.
Well, you've had some readiness training and ability, so you sucked it up one moment and go, I'm going to really make a difference here because you've got that.
Yeah, and my wife used to live in Lahaina. She went to Lahaina school, so she knew a lot of that. I mean, that's her area. So there was more sentimental value on that end too. And of course, we've got a bunch of friends, and like Phil mentioned, one of our guys that works for us, Kevin, lost his house out there. So we're scrambling because there was no communications. The comms lines were down.
Right. Yeah.
So we couldn't even get in touch with Kevin. So I'm like, boots on the ground, let's go. We're going to go find him and take him some materials and whatever he needs. But so we had planes in the air the next day, and then physically doing search and rescue that Friday. I was actually part of the task force with FEMA to go out and start search and rescue. We were active for about 2.5 months in giving help and getting boats out there. Certain areas you couldn't get to. So we had to boat in materials all the way from our side, which is a good hour drive or even a boat ride out there. And we could go on and on, like you said, for it. But,
right.
The recovery's happening. It's not going to happen overnight. It's still a 5-8 year thing that's going to happen. And yeah, we're here for the community. And I got to give props out since we're talking about it. And Buzz, we talked a little bit about this last week, was CEDIA kicked in. We had Freshstron kicked in some money. Lutron, Phil reached out. They kicked in some money. So our industry, when we reached out for help, I think there was over $300,000 or $400,000 between product and money that funneled from CEDIA industry to help Maui out.
That was kind of interesting because that CEDIA happened kind of right after, maybe a couple of weeks after that fire happened, and the outpour from people at CEDIA when Pat was there was really, I mean, overwhelming. And I got to give it to Lutron and all of the industry partners that we had there. Were going up to Pat and going, what can we do? How can we help?
Oh, that's wonderful.
Well, and I told you, Buzz, last week. I said, I told the team at CEDIA, I said, I'm going to CEDIA to dispel some of the bullshit that was being talked about, right? All the rumors, this, that, and the other thing. So I told the guys, I said, go do your thing. I'm going to meet with other people and stop some of this stuff. Part of that conversation was, one, giving them information, because with my boots on the ground, I can tell them fact. Here's what happened. Here's the other thing. But the flip side of that was, like Phil said, Pat, what can we do? How do we help? I mean, by design, Joaquin, those guys stepped up.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Ron from One Firefly is like, dude, let's set up a Facebook and we'll set up a website. We'll pay for it. Let's get some money funds. Tommy, them, and Joaquin kicked in. Sonance did a bunch of stuff through their Sonance Foundation. Chad with Surgex, Bobby Robert from Snap. Snap sent out a bunch of, because we were helping out with the EOCs, the Joint Operating Centers. They were needing network gear. So I called up Bobby and I were getting stuff every week. It was sad, but it was awesome how our industry kicked in. And that's what I'm saying. I don't know the exact figures, but it was probably $300,000, not in cash, all in cash, but a lot of it was product just coming in that they just wrote off and said, whatever you need. If you need more, you let us know.
That's wonderful. And a community, business friends and associates help out. It made it easier for you to put your own personal time and your own personal heart into the local on the ground support too.
Yeah, and our integrators, the integrators in Maui came together. A lot of them were asking me, hey, how can we help? And we got trailers. Can we get? So we did a caravan because I had access to get to Lahaina, right? At that for the first 2 weeks, they didn't really want people going back and forth. Just again, you had tourists coming in, they wanted to take pictures, and it's just like that's not the time to do this. Nor is it time to point fingers. Because I'm like, guys, we need to get through this. I will even help point fingers and put blame on. But we got to get through this first. Screw all that other crap, right? But we had eDesign pop in. They're a competitor of ours, but who cares? Let's put all the egos aside. Control Freaks came in. Tony from AC/DC. So our local integrators were reaching out to me going, hey, we know you've got the input and you've got a foot on a beat. What's happening on it? How can we help? So the integrators here came together too.
Yeah, I mean, we were loading up coolers of ice because no electricity, no communication, no whatsoever. Coolers of ice and food and whatever we could get in trucks. And Pat was just caravanning it out and then trying to find local places to like set up camp so people could come and get stuff that they needed and at least get food, get ice, get all of that stuff that you don't understand the type of things in a disaster like that. Just having ice is phenomenal to have.
Amazing what the simple, ordinary things of life, how important they become when people are really, really in need.
Yeah, and Buzz, and again, I know we're short on time, and I'm not trying to downplay the Palisades and all that stuff because that was tragedy as well.
Oh my goodness.
Remember, we are the most isolated, populated location on Earth, right? I'm not saying there's not more foreign areas, but as far as population is concerned,
very true.
And when I hear people going, well, FEMA didn't get here quick enough, I'm like, stop. I was the guy that got the call to get the C-17s from Oahu over. And I think we talked a little bit about that as well with IT. And I'm like, logistically on that front, right? Because one, you have no communications out in Lahaina. There's really, the roadways are just screwed up all the hell, right? So boating in is the only way. We're limited here because of geographically. So for a huge FEMA contingency to get here, they've got to ramp up. We don't have that. There's FEMA people, but not like to that level. That was one of the things I wanted this place is no, FEMA was here within 2 days. Now, it was not their main ground people. It was their upper level people because they needed to figure out like us, how bad
they have to come in and assess, and then they decide what teams and what capabilities and resources, what's really necessary. And
but that comes into play. And I know it's the same thing with Palisades and all that to a little bit lesser degree, because again, logistically, you can drive from Nevada over or Arizona and bring stuff in. You can get support way quicker.
Of course.
So again, not trying to downplay any of those things either, but just that's where teams like mine and the community has to step up, because for those first 72 hours, you cannot rely on the government. I hate to say it, you just can't.
That's just reality. You knew that. So local people, local support,
came together,
and led by some people that have the drive and determination. And fortunately, in the case of Lahaina, with people like yourself that had extra prepared, if you will, based on your history, to lead the effort until extra help got there.
Right.
So
correct. Yeah. And again, it's not just Lahaina. We had fires close to Phil and I. I mean, we were concerned.
Notifications that evening. So Pat's Central Kihei, and there was a fire that was concerning coming this way, right? Wow. Yeah, he was getting pinged on his phone, hey, be ready to evacuate. I was getting pinged on my phone and watching people posting videos from Lahaina on their phones or whatever, right? And I'm just going, wow. And there's only one road out of Kihei. That road gets compromised. Where are we going? the whole island was just in such a chaos. And I think they were a little bit overzealous from where the fire was here, but all the firefighters were in Lahaina. So if they had another fire, they weren't going to be able to get to it. And so it was a really sobering moment to understand how vulnerable the whole island is.
Well, hopefully there's another outcome of all the recovery is to be, I'm not going to say better prepared because I think that's unfair, but to know, okay, this happened. What do we want to, how can we improve some things? How can we be more ready in the future?
Yeah. And with my involvement with the U.S. Air Force Auxiliary Civil Air Patrol and all that stuff, it's a double-edged sword for me, right? Because in one regard, it's like, okay, I get information typically about a half hour before the general public does, so that I can relay it to Phil and my team, and because I'm always telling them, hey, there's an accident or there's this, because I have all the radios and all that stuff. But on the other end, it's like, here we go.
Yeah. Got it. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for the time today to talk about Pacific Audio Communications and your team and your business, how you're looking at the future, success points, the challenges and opportunities of doing business in a remote location. And then, of course, this conversation about the recovery for Lahaina. It was a sobering thing that happened to everybody there. We're going to do our best to keep making sure the communication everywhere is accurate about what's going on. And I wish you all the best with that. And thanks for the time to talk about Pacific Audio Communications with Delano News Advance. It's been a pleasure. Take care, guys. Bye.